February 9th, 1942. The port of New York. A captured French ocean liner, being refitted as the American troop carrier USS Lafayette, catches fire, capsizes, and sinks into the Hudson River in broad daylight, in America's most important harbor, while the Navy watches. In the 3 months since Pearl Harbor, the United States has already lost 120 merchant ships to German U-boats in the Battle of the Atlantic. Now, a ship burns in its own backyard. The government calls it an accident. Almost nobody believes them. The Navy deploys more than 100 agents to the waterfront. They are assigned to investigate possible Mussolini supporters within the Italian-American fishermen and dock worker population. Their efforts are fruitless. The dock workers and fishermen are tight-lipped and distant to strangers. Federal badges mean nothing on these piers. Someone else owns them. That someone is Charles Luciano, born Salvatore Lucania on November 24, 1897, in Sicily. Luciano is considered the father of modern organized crime in the United States. He immigrates with his family to New York when he is 9 years old. He arrives poor. He does not stay that way. As a schoolboy, he demands lunch money from younger children as protection. He meets a Jewish boy named Meyer Lansky who refuses to be bullied. They become lifelong friends. That friendship will one day change the outcome of a world war. By his 20s, Luciano runs bootlegging, gambling, and extortion across New York. In 1929, unknown assailants lure him into a car, beat him, stab him repeatedly, and leave him for dead on Staten Island. He survives. His right eye droops for the rest of his life. The nickname Lucky stops being ironic. By 1931, Luciano orchestrates the assassination of boss Salvatore Maranzano and builds the Commission, a ruling body to oversee all mafia activity in the United States and to mediate conflict between families. He does not call himself boss of all bosses. He does not need to. He controls the Manhattan waterfront, construction, the garment district, and trucking. He controls the docks. In 1936, prosecutor Thomas Dewey convicts him on 62 counts of compulsory prostitution. He is sentenced to 30 to 50 years in state prison. He keeps running everything from his cell. By 1942, Luciano controls New York's 5 families from behind bars. Meyer Lansky serves as his connection to the outside world. The most powerful criminal in America is locked up, and the United States government is about to ask him for a favor. The Navy has a problem it cannot badge its way out of. The port's security problem is not about patrol boats. It is about who actually controls the labor, the waterfront muscle, and the informal rules that run the docks. Federal agents walk those piers like tourists in a foreign country. Nobody talks to them. Nobody helps them. The docks run on loyalty, and that loyalty belongs to the mob. Office of Naval Intelligence officers, including Captain Roscoe C. McFall and Commander Charles Radcliffe Haffenden, consult Manhattan District Attorney Frank Hogan and Assistant District Attorney Murray Gurfein for access to the underworld. They are naval officers going to a district attorney to ask how to reach a crime boss. That is how bad the situation is. They make contact through Fulton Fish Market boss, Joseph Sox Lanza, who points them toward the most influential incarcerated figure available, Luciano. Lanza makes the next step clear. If you want real compliance across the waterfront, you need the big boss. That means Luciano. There is no plan B. In March 1942, the Navy approaches Luciano through his attorney Moses Polikoff. Intelligence officers offer better prison conditions in exchange for Luciano's help securing the docks. Lansky and Polikoff travel to the penitentiary. Lucky reportedly leaps to his feet and shouts, "What the hell are you doing here?" Lansky lays it out. The Navy needs Luciano's network, the docks, the unions, the men who will not talk to anyone wearing a badge. In exchange, the state of New York will look at his sentence. Luciano worries. The Navy offers no sentence reduction in writing. As an illegal alien, he faces deportation. If word of his alliance leaks out, a fascist lynching is sure to follow his homecoming in Italy. He has real reasons to say no. But there is something else. Luciano's control over his crime family is slowly slipping away from inside prison. The freedom provided by the proposal offers the perfect cover for the boss to confer with his top lieutenants and regain his power. He says yes. The state of New York, Luciano, and the Navy strike a deal. Luciano guarantees the full assistance of his organization in providing intelligence to the Navy. In return, the state of New York agrees to commute Luciano's sentence. The United States government has just made a deal with the most dangerous criminal in the country. They put it on paper. Then they will spend the next decade trying to make everyone forget they did. The Navy moves Luciano from Dannemora to Great Meadow Prison in May 1942, closer to New York City and easier for his associates to visit. The visits begin immediately. Luciano's prison log soon includes a who's who of mob figures and attorneys. Naval officers sit across from crime bosses in a state prison conference room. They drink coffee. They make plans. They talk about the war. Luciano orders his criminal network to watch for saboteurs, report suspicious activity, and prevent labor strikes that could disrupt the war effort. The results are immediate. Albert Anastasia, who runs the Brooklyn Docks and Murder Inc., guarantees cooperation from the longshoremen. Anastasia does not make guarantees lightly. When he says there will be no strikes, there are no strikes. Dock strikes stop after Luciano becomes involved. No major acts of sabotage occur in New York Harbor for the rest of the war. One man, from a prison cell, does what 100 federal agents could not do from the street. Lieutenant Maurice Kelly, a former New York Police Department officer who joined Naval Intelligence after Pearl Harbor, testifies years later that, from the time Commander Haffenden made these contacts with Luciano, there was a very open and cooperative condition that existed between the investigators and the people that were very influential on the various docks in the Port of New York. The Navy gets what it paid for. The docks hold. The war effort moves. Then the scope of the operation expands. The Allies are winning in North Africa. The next step is Europe. And Europe starts with one island, Sicily. Planning for Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily, begins at the Casablanca Conference in January 1943. President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill agree Sicily will be the first step toward defeating Italy and opening a southern front in Europe. The plan is bold. The problem is simple. The Allies know almost nothing about Sicily. Planners realize they lack what they desperately need: Italian-speaking specialists, reliable local contacts, and practical on-the-ground knowledge that could turn a map into an operation. In May 1943, Vice Admiral H.K. Hewitt wrote that he lacked Italian-speaking officers to help plan the coming invasion, and wanted personnel with language skills and knowledge of Sicily. The United States military, preparing to invade the seventh largest island in the Mediterranean, did not have enough people who spoke the language or who knew the land. Intelligence on Sicily was close to zero. Haffenden went back to Luciano. Luciano's associates found numerous Sicilians to help naval intelligence draw maps of the harbors of Sicily and to dig up old snapshots of the coastline. These were not professional intelligence officers. They were immigrants, fishermen, and former smugglers who grew up on that island. They knew every inlet, every road, every port. They knew which locals could be trusted and which ones worked for Mussolini. The Navy knew none of this. Luciano's network knew all of it. From his jail cell, Luciano recommended certain people who knew Sicily well, and Lansky escorted them to the naval intelligence offices. Joe Sox Lanza helped. Lanza recalled that sometimes some of the Sicilians were very nervous. Joe would just mention the name of Lucky Luciano and say he had given them orders to talk. If the Sicilians were still reluctant, Joe would stop smiling and say, "Lucky would not be pleased to hear that you have not been helpful." Luciano's name, spoken in a room in New York, loosened lips in Sicily. All the information was sifted and analyzed, much of it ending up on a huge wall map in Haffenden's office, with code numbers referring to particular reports from specific individuals. Some of these were major underworld figures who were part of the international network, established by Luciano before he went to jail. Through naval intelligence's mafia contacts, the names of Sicilian underworld personalities and friendly Sicilian natives who could be trusted were obtained and actually used in the Sicilian campaign. Captain Wallace S. Wharton, head of the counterintelligence section at the Office of Naval Intelligence, states that on the occasions when Commander Haffenden gave names to him, he was told that he had obtained these names from his contacts in the underworld. The names of the individuals in Sicily who could be trusted turned out to be 40% correct upon eventual checkup and on the basis of actual experience. 40%. In wartime intelligence against a hostile foreign power with no formal network on the ground, 40% is extraordinary. Maps, coastline photographs, and trusted contacts inside enemy territory, all of it flows from one man locked in a New York State prison. When the invasion begins, a small Italian-speaking team lands with the first wave and pushes inland to link up with sympathetic locals. The intelligence gathered includes concrete operational material, minefield maps, and in at least one reported episode, access to documents on Axis defensive positions and naval code material. Soldiers cross those beaches with Luciano's intelligence in their hands. The Americans quickly cut across Sicily to occupy the western half of the island and take its capital, Palermo, on the northwest coast. Their casualties are a fraction of those suffered by the British. On July 22nd, Patton captures the Sicilian capital Palermo just 2 hours before Montgomery. A scant 19 days later, Allied troops enter Messina and end the Sicilian campaign. Sicily falls in 38 days. The Navy immediately burns all evidence of its cooperation with organized crime. The files go into the fire. The wall map comes down. The prison visit logs disappear. The Navy has what it wanted from Luciano. The docks held. Sicily fell. The war moves forward. And Luciano sits in his cell at Great Meadow, waiting for the government to honor its end of the deal. The war ends in August 1945. The docks held. Sicily fell. Germany surrenders, Japan surrenders. America celebrates. Luciano waits. In the summer of 1945, Luciano, still serving time behind bars, petitions the state of New York for executive clemency. He insists that his cooperation in both Operation Underworld and Operation Husky warrants his immediate freedom. He is right. The deal was clear. He delivered. Now it is their turn. The Navy goes quiet. Naval authorities, embarrassed that they had to recruit organized crime to help their war effort, declined to confirm Luciano's claim. The men who sat across from him in that prison conference room, the men who asked him to secure the docks, identify the Sicilian contacts, stop the strikes, those men now pretend the meetings never happened. They burn the files and keep their mouths shut. An institution that cannot admit it needed a gangster to win a war will not put that admission in writing. Luciano is alone with a deal that only one side will acknowledge. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office validates the facts. The State Parole Board unanimously agrees to recommend to the governor that Luciano be released and deported immediately. Deported, not freed. Deported. The word lands like a verdict. Luciano was born in Sicily. He came to America at 9 years old. He built his entire life, his entire empire, on American streets, in American cities, inside an American criminal system that tolerated him for decades until it needed something from him. He considers himself American. The government considers him an Italian national when it is convenient. On January 3, 1946, Dewey commutes Luciano's sentence on condition of immediate deportation to Italy. Luciano has served 9.5 years of his 30 to 50-year sentence. The man who put him in prison is now the man releasing him. Thomas Dewey, the crusading prosecutor who called Luciano the most dangerous criminal in America, is now the governor signing his release papers. The irony is not lost on anyone. Dewey's statement acknowledges Luciano's cooperation, but is vague about its true value. Upon entry of the United States into the war, Luciano's support was sought by the armed services in coercing others to provide information concerning any possible enemy attack. It appears that he cooperated in such effort, though the actual value of the information procured is not clear. It appears that he cooperated. 9 years in prison, docks secured, Sicily mapped, Patton's casualty rate a fraction of the British. And the official government statement is that it appears he cooperated. That sentence is not ambiguity. It is a door closing. On February 2nd, 1946, 2 federal immigration agents transport Luciano from Sing Sing prison to Ellis Island in New York Harbor for deportation proceedings. He is placed in a cell on Ellis Island, the same entry point where his family and millions of other immigrants first arrived in America. He came through that island as a child, full of possibility. He leaves through it as a deportee. The symmetry is brutal. Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, and Moses Polikoff visit him there for their final instructions. To comply with government rules that only $60 could be taken out of the country, Luciano gives the $400 in cash he has on him to Costello. He is leaving America with $60. On the night before his departure, Luciano shares a spaghetti dinner on his freighter with Anastasia and 5 other guests. The men who built empires together eat a last meal in a ship's cabin. Then the guests go home. Luciano stays on the boat. On February 10th, Luciano's ship sails from Brooklyn for Italy. On February 28th, after a 17-day voyage, the ship arrives in Naples. He never sees America again. Back in New York, the government's version of events hardens fast. Rumors spread that Luciano bribed his way out of prison. The Federal Bureau of Narcotics claims Luciano ran drug smuggling operations from Italy, and that his wartime service had been minimal. The agency that played no role in the docks, the Navy meetings, or the invasion of Sicily is now the loudest voice on what Luciano's contribution was worth. The men who actually ran Operation Underworld say nothing. Their files are ash. Luciano, exiled in Naples, is furious. He knows what he did. He knows what was promised. He tells anyone who will listen. The press picks it up. The syndicated columnist and radio broadcaster Walter Winchell reports in 1947 that Luciano would receive the Medal of Honor for his secret services. He never does. The report causes enough noise that the U.S. government cannot fully ignore it. The story will not stay buried. Luciano tries to shorten the distance between himself and New York. In October 1946, Luciano secretly relocates to Havana, Cuba, first taking a freighter from Naples to Caracas, Venezuela, then a flight to Rio de Janeiro, then to Mexico City, then doubling back to Caracas, where he takes a private plane to Cuba, arriving October 29th. He is trying to get home. Cuba is close enough to smell it. He moves into an estate in the Miramar section of Havana. He hosts meetings of top-level American mob bosses. He dines at nightclubs. He is photographed with Frank Sinatra. He is not hiding. He is announcing. He is saying, "I am still here. I am still the boss." The U.S. government did not finish me. The U.S. government notices. Federal Bureau of Narcotics Commissioner Harry J. Anslinger notifies the Cubans that the U.S. will block all shipment of narcotic prescription drugs to Cuba while Luciano remains in the country. 2 days later, the Cuban government announces that Luciano is in custody and will be deported to Italy within 48 hours. America does not send agents. It does not file extradition papers. It threatens to withhold medicine from an entire country until that country removes one man. Cuba folds in 48 hours. It is the same move Luciano always made. You find the thing someone cannot afford to lose, and you squeeze it. The U.S. government learned from the best. After his secret trip to Cuba, Luciano spends the rest of his life in Italy under tight police surveillance. Every move tracked, every meeting logged. The man who once ran the most powerful criminal organization in the world lives the rest of his days watched, cataloged, and contained. Back in the United States, the pressure on Dewey builds. In 1953, Governor Dewey, pushed by allegations that he sold Luciano his pardon, orders a confidential investigation by the state's Commissioner of Investigation, William Herlins. Herlins releases his 2,600-page report in 1954. It offers proof of Luciano's involvement with the Navy without finding any wrongdoing by Dewey. The proof exists. It is written down. 2,600 pages of it. Luciano's cooperation with the US government, documented, verified, and sitting in a government report. The Navy reads it. Naval officials request that Dewey not release the report on the grounds that it would be a public relations disaster for the Navy and might damage future similar war efforts. Dewey agrees. The report is not released until after his death in the mid-1970s. For 20 years, the proof of what the government did and what it promised sits in a locked drawer. The Navy fought a war partly on the back of a jailed crime boss, and the official position is that it would rather let that man's reputation rot than admit it publicly. Historians still argue about the exact weight of Luciano's contribution. Scholars such as Selwyn Robb argue that Luciano was out of touch with the Sicilian mafia, and that neither he nor the Cosa Nostra had any significant contribution to the Allied victory in Sicily. On the other side, scholar Ezio Costanzo points out that naval intelligence officers visited Luciano 11 times throughout his sentence, and that Commander Hoffenden stated in numerous reports how his men were interviewing native-born Italians who were cooperating because of Luciano. 11 official visits. A 2,600-page government report confirming cooperation. A wall map built from his contacts. A navy that burned its own files the moment Sicily fell. Governments do not burn files on things that did not matter. Dewey's conditional commutation and deportation is, as researcher Thomas Hunt explains, the best possible outcome Dewey could have hoped for, keeping Luciano out of New York and the United States permanently. Dewey prosecuted Luciano in 1936. Dewey released him in 1946. Dewey made sure he could never come back. One man controlled every stage of Luciano's legal fate, and at every stage, Dewey won. Luciano delivered the docks, he delivered Sicily's coastline, and he delivered the contacts that walked into battle with American soldiers. He got 9.5 years shaved off a prison sentence and a one-way ticket to a country he had not lived in since childhood. The deal the government made was real, and the reward it gave was the minimum it could legally justify. Then it locked the proof in a drawer for 2 decades and let the Bureau of Narcotics call him a drug smuggler. Luciano sits in Naples under surveillance, watching the American mob from across an ocean, knowing exactly what happened. He built the machine. America used the machine. America kept the machine and deported the man who built it. Luciano dies in Italy on January 26th, 1962. His body is permitted to be transported back to the United States for burial. His body gets to come home. He never did. He spent 16 years in Italian exile, watched by police, blocked from Cuba, blocked from America. The most powerful criminal organizer in United States history was frozen out of the country he built his life in because the government decided that is what his cooperation was worth. The Navy burned all evidence of its cooperation with organized crime the day the Sicilian campaign ended. The Herlines report sat locked in a drawer for 20 years. The men who ran Operation Underworld never spoke publicly about what Luciano actually delivered. Operation Underworld is a case study in wartime pragmatism, what governments will do, who they will deal with, and what moral debt gets rung up when survival is the priority. The United States government made a deal. It got the docks, it got Sicily, it got the war. Luciano got a ship ticket and a locked door. Some contracts are written to be broken. The government knew that when it signed. So did Luciano. The difference is, only one of them had the power to enforce it.